So now let's look at a cut that's going to have a little bit of a different quality. This one isn't a good one. Let's look at these, right? So now we have, and again, we're talking about workflows, trying to make economy of commands work well for you to save time to get to your desired result. So we have 4 cuts that are equal in width and also equal in their placement across the surface. So the process here, and this is in this orientation now, the process is here we're going to place a subtractive geometry in that location, create its thickness and properties, and then we do what's called an array. And it's just like AutoCAD for those of you who are AutoCAD users. Array is going to allow you to set parameters for how far and how many duplications there's going to be of that object. So that's going to be, it may or may not be valuable for this cut down here where you only have 2, because then you could just copy it over and it's just one time you tell it how far to go and that's it. But if you've got 4, 5 or more, 150 that are equidistant, that's incredibly valuable. So let's look at that one. And for the sake of the video, what I was just talking about is these 4 cuts right here. So we're going to place this first one, and then we're going to array 1, 2, 3 more. So that looks like this. But first we have to actually find, I only know right now that this is 4 feet by 1.5 feet. So now let's quickly just find where the other cut is. So this is the back view. And remember, if the back view is in this orientation, that means that up here is the top, or down here I should say is the top. And if you get confused, jump on down to this and you can see why that is. So this was the view we were looking at. Your 4 cuts that we're now doing are here, and the orientation to those cuts is those. That's why it's the bottom. Okay, so back up. Those are 7 feet deep. So the top view, we've got 4 feet by 1.5 feet by 7 feet deep. So let's get cracking on actually creating that. So now I'm going to keep the cube in the same orientation, so now we understand where the different geometries are going. Let's create a new box. We'll utilize the smart track. Actually, I forgot how far off the corner it was. So it's 8.5 feet off the corner. So that brings up another point. If I'm going a fraction of a foot, but I have my unit set to feet, how do I input that data? So you hover over the corner, and we start to track over. So now's the time where I need to type in 8.5 feet. We have 2 options. Yeah, 2 options. Well, actually 3 options. You could type it in inches if you wanted, if you knew what 8.5 feet was in inches. You can type it in solid feet with a decimal. So you could say 8.5 feet, or you can say 8 feet 6 inches. So that looks like 8 feet 6 inches would work fine. Or you can type in 8.5 feet. Or you can type in 102 inches? Is that what it is? All right. Yeah, we got somebody who knows a little bit about construction back there, huh? Yeah.
But you don't have to put the quotation, whatever that is, the apostrophe?
No, actually. So that's a good question. You mean the @ symbol? Or no, for inches? Yeah. So if I was to type in 102 inches, that would go 102 feet. Without the inch mark, so I'd have to put inches.
If you were doing inches, but if you're doing feet.
If I'm doing feet, then I have to type in feet. Well, I don't have to put in anything, but I like to be in the practice of doing so. Good questions. 8.5 feet.
How do you know if you need the @ symbol or not again?
Also a good question. How do you know if you need the @ symbol? Because I am tracking off of a point, this doesn't have any orientation requirements. So I'm tracking off of the edge point. I have an orientation. So I have a direction because I'm pulling it along the track in this direction. all I need to give it is magnitude. Does that make sense? So if you've ever taken physics classes, think of it like it's a vector. You've got everything you need except for the magnitude.
And when you do need it is
When you need it when you're set, well, it's hard to describe. In this case, you have the secondary variable, which is direction. You need it when you're doing a command that is directionless, that you need to tell it what direction to go. So I can type in, actually, I could be totally wrong. Let's test it. 8.5 feet. No, I'm right. Okay. You have me second guessing myself there. So I went 8.5 feet along the smart track. Yes?
I tried to type it in and it just said unknown command.
I'll come look at it. You might not have been tracking correctly if it said unknown command. I'll check it out. So 8.5 feet I've gone over. Now I forget my dimensions. It was 4 feet by 1.5 feet by 7 feet deep, I believe. But now, remember, this is my x-axis. That is my y. So I'm going first in the x direction 1.5 feet. But it's going left, so it's negative. Then I'm going 4 feet, but it's going this way, so it's what? Negative. Negative 1.5 feet, negative 4 feet. At negative 1.5 feet, comma, negative 4 feet.
Just to be clear, like, does that kind of relate to, I might have spaced out on that part, but in physics when you're describing direction and you're going, like, down.
Yep.
When you're doing gravity, like, you usually use negative.
Exactly, yeah, precisely. Yeah, so it's just like physics. When you have a force like gravity, it's a negative force because it exists in 3 dimensions.
Is it negative 7 feet?
No,
For the y?
it's not negative 7 feet because right now we're just setting the base plane of it, which I'm drawing from the top.
Okay.
I could have drawn it from the side. I didn't want to, though.
Okay.
That's actually a good point that I should make here at the same time.
I see.
The reason I'm operating in the top view right now is because the default work plane, and what I mean by work plane is the plane in which you're going to be drawing geometry for perspective, is in the XY plane. So I technically can't, unless I override the data input, I can't just use simple dimensions and go down in the Z direction here. Does that make sense? Okay, so negative 1.5 feet, comma, negative 4 feet gives me the cut that I want in that direction. Now I tell it to go negative 7 feet. And remember, so this brings up a good point that you asked about, Annalie. The last command, when I said at negative 1.5 feet, that was directionless, because with a cube base point, you can go any direction. So by using my negatives, I tell it which direction to go. Here, I only have one orientation, and I only need to tell it whether or not it's going to go up or down. Additionally, it doesn't necessarily have a track to operate off of, so it can't tell me right now with one. I can't just use a positive to go up or down because it's not on a track.
So it was 7?
Yep, negative 7 feet. So I will say this, guys. It seems like at this point we took a very, very long time to create 2 boxes. We haven't done much yet. But we're doing the same thing again and again and again when we create these boxes. We're just doing it in slightly different orientations. So once you got enough practice, you're going to start creating 1,000 boxes a minute. So now we've got one of these, and I need to create 4. So the command here is array, A-R-R-A-Y. So when you do a simple array, and there were a number of different types in there, and we'll get to those as we need them, but when you do a simple array, it's going to operate off of the X, Y, and Z axis. If you want to work off of the X, Y, and Z axis, you have to do what's called array linear. and then you'll select a line across which it will array in a line, right? Array linear. Long-winded, but anyway. So here's the key. It starts off, and always read your command prompt, because it's not just asking you for all of your information at once. It's only asking you for one bit. And that one bit right now is the number in the x direction.
4.
That's right. It's going to be 4, because the x direction is going this way. And for the video, going that way. So 4 for the number in the x direction. The number in the y direction is going along the green axis. We want 1. And then the number in the z-axis, which means they could stack on top of one another.
0.
No, you can't have a value of 0 because it has to exist, right? So 1. So now it's asking for the x spacing. Now here's where a little bit of math is going to help you out, just some foresight math. The objects are 1.5 feet wide, but they're also 1.5 feet apart. So these objects technically are 3 feet apart on center. So if you measured from base point of this one to the base point of the next one, it's 3 feet. So that means when you're doing a copy from one to the next, it needs to go 3 feet in order to generate that 1.5 foot gap. Okay, so that is going to be our spacing. And if you're familiar, I know there have been a few physics terms being thrown around here today. For those of you who have taken physics, it's the same thing as what is the term now? The lead on a wave, is that what it's called? Or the step? I forget what the term is now technically in physics, but there's a few. It's a lead or step or something like that. Period, that's what it's called. The period of a wave. It goes from the apex of one to the apex of the other. Yes?
So it's going to be, which way is going to be, should be negative?
That part I'm for some reason forgetting right now. It might be a negative. So let's try it out. So I'm going to go.
Or we just put
So actually, let's look at it this way. So I'm trying to give you guys a tip now for how to figure it out, because actually I just kind of forgot whether or not I had to give it a negative number. So what I would do in that case, if I can't recall whether or not I need to give it a negative number, but it's asking me for a magnitude, I can create a base point by clicking here, and then move my line in the direction I want it to go. And if it needs a negative number, it'll produce a negative number. If it doesn't, it'll just give it a number, and it'll borrow the orientation. So I do believe it will need a negative number. So if I go here and I move it over,
No, doesn't need it. I don't think so. They can't.
okay, so I can just click and give it the orientation. I think if you just typed in the value, let me try that real quick. So array, x number is 4, y, z, and then x spacing, I'm going to say negative 3 feet. Yeah, okay. So if you type in the number, then it needs to be a negative number because you're not giving it the orientation. But you saw when I clicked my base point, I could just pull it in the direction, and because that has direction, all I have to do is give it magnitude. Does that make sense?
So it need it or it doesn't need it?
It depends on, that's what I'm saying. It depends on how you do it. So I just typed in -3 and it works. If I go back, I'll show you again. Array. I'm going to select the objects to array. 4 in the x direction, 1 in the y, 1 in the z. Now I'm going to show you the opposite. If I click a base point here, and I move my mouse in the direction I want it to go, it already has direction or orientation. So I should be able to just type 3 feet. I could be wrong here. Nope, it works. And then you click to finish it off. Now, with array, at the end, right now they're showing up in like this little pinkish color. At the end, that's just a preview. you can change the count, you can change the spacing after you've seen what it looks like. In order to accept it, once you're happy with the result, hit enter. And then they become real geometry. Yes?
If you wanted to add like 3 more, would you put in X number equals
Okay,
7?
Yeah, good question. So I'll go back, I'll redo it again, object to array, 4, 1, 1. I'll go here, I'll say -3 feet. Or I guess I could have just typed in 3 feet. So now,
And it's not done.
oh, look at that.
See?
Hold on. Here.
When you click it, it's not done.
Oh, you have to click the direction. Sorry. I guess I didn't explain that clearly. So I can click the origin point and slide it along my track, but I need to actually click that track. That says this is the orientation I want it to go. Okay, so back to your question, if I wanted to change the count now, I can just go up here and change by going clicking on the X spacing. It'll ask me for the new spacing. So I can change it to 4 feet or -4 feet or go back to -3 feet and change the count to 10. We're back to 4. Okay? Any other questions? All right. So I'm going to come around because I see some of you guys are kind of like chatting with your neighbor trying to figure it out. So I'm going to get you all up to this point. I'm going to stop the video here. And then next, we're going to start actually cutting geometry out of the original form.